Platte City, Missouri stake lies adjacent to the Liberty, Missouri stake, now a very famous location in church history, encompassing several important church history sites, including the ironically named Liberty Jail. From your study of church history, you will all know something of the experience the prophet Joseph Smith and his brethren had while imprisoned in that facility during the winter of 1838-39. This was a terribly difficult time in our history, for the church generally, and certainly for the prophet Joseph himself, who bore the brunt of the persecution in that period.
And who were Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith's persecutors? No one less esteemed than the Quorum of the 12. Yes, those wascally wabbits, Brigham Young and his brigade of bloodthirsty brigands, called the Quorum of the 12. So it's only appropriate that your big, fat, blubbery tears should be blubbering from the pulpit in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the Jeffery Holland hallmark version of Mormon history. Yes, Jeffery Holland, your band of brothers, they set up and scapegoated Joseph and Hyrum Smith for treason and ultimate execution.
Indeed, I dare say that until his martyrdom 5.5 years later, there was no more burdensome time in Joseph's life than this cruel, illegal, and unjustified incarceration in Liberty Jail.
And who was responsible? Well, we're listening to him right now. The 1838 trial of Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith for treason shows that every witness for the prosecution accusing the Smiths of treason was no less than all of the Missouri Mormon leadership, who eventually became the Quorum of the 12 in 1841. That is no less than Brigham Young, Parley Pratt, Orson Hyde, John Page, W.W. Phelps, John Corll. It goes on and on. Every one of these traitors to the Mormon Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith eventually became the Quorum of the 12 and led the poor, suffering British saints out to the God-forsaken desert called Utah. And ever since, they've been trying to hide and conceal their abominable history, their history against mankind and all decent Mormons everywhere. And while Hyrum and Joseph Smith languished for 6 months in the dungeon of Liberty Jail, what were the Quorum of the 12 doing? They were having the time of their lives, thinking they had stolen the church with Joseph Smith, set up Joseph Smith for treason and for his eventual execution. My, what evil can lurk into the evil hearts of these Missouri Mormons. So who were these evil Missouri Mormons that set up Joseph Smith for treason and thought they had escaped with all the gold of the Mormon church? Well, the stake president was Brigham Young, who went into hiding as soon as Joseph Smith got arrested. Second was W.W. Phelps, who testified against Joseph Smith, calling on him as the traitor who wanted to overthrow the United States government. Oh, there was also Orson Pratt brothers, Parley P. Pratt, somehow escaped justice also, ended up in Jackson County and then in Cleveland, publishing his little pamphlets about what a hero Parley Pratt was. His brother Orson Pratt all the time testifying against Joseph Smith, trying to set him up for execution. My, these evil Mormon Missourians. And these are the legacy of the Quorum of the 12. Oh, Mr. Holland, we love all those big bear tears you now pour out for your beloved Joseph Smith, which your ancestors set up for execution. My, what evil lurks into the hearts of these Missouri Mormons. So let's recapitulate. The Mormon leadership in Missouri that set up Joseph Smith, who had barely arrived as a visiting authority. So where had Joseph Smith been during the first part of 1838 when the conspiracy to overthrow the United States government was being hatched in Missouri? Well, Joseph Smith was out east negotiating a settlement for the banking scandal in Kirtland, Ohio. He just arrived with his family in Missouri approximately July of 1838, hardly in time to hatch such a labyrinthine conspiracy to overthrow the United States. No wonder that Joseph and Hyrum Smith had their heads spinning when suddenly they were accused of the plot to overthrow the United States from their beloved state of Missouri, which they weren't even residents. Joseph Smith had only temporarily been in Missouri and was staying at his mother, Lucy Mack Smith's house in far west Missouri. Joseph Smith had just arrived from the east after months of financial negotiations with his investors to rescue the Kirtland, Ohio Bank. Lucy Mack and 27 other Kirtland Mormon families in about June or July of 1838 left en masse from Ohio and arrived in northern Missouri approximately in July of 1838. Those Mormons from Kirtland, headed by Lucy Mack and Joseph Smith Sr., divided into groups, each settling in different parts of Missouri. Samuel Smith ended up in Daviess County with a group of Kirtland Mormons. Throughout the history of the Mormon Church, wherever the Smiths settled, the Smith boys would always settle adjoining counties. The Smith family never resided in one county alone, but spread out to spread their influence throughout the different counties of the state. Joseph Smith, I believe, ended up in Clay County, not quite sure. He had just arrived, and when the violence broke out in Gallatin, he was writing letters to his eastern bankers in his mother's home in far west. The sheriffs who went there to arrest him for the violence that occurred in Daviess County, a county over, left him laughing, shook his hand, and realized that Joseph Smith had nothing to do with the violence at the polls in August of 1838. So, Joseph Smith at this point in time was a visitor in Missouri. He had no local authority in Missouri state. The local leaders in far west Missouri was, again, State President Patton and State President Brigham Young. The local leaders of the Daviess County stake was Bishop Lyman Wright. The Smiths had no local leadership authority in these stakes. Also, neither did the Quorum of the 12. The Quorum was put into any leadership role under the banner of Quorum of the 12. The Quorum of the 12 was a non-existent entity, having been stripped of its authority to oversee any stakes in the Mormon Church in 1835 by Joseph Smith. See D. Michael Quinn's Origin of Powers for the citation. Joseph Smith, a visitor in Missouri during this period of time of August of 1838, had no local church authority, either in far west or Daviess County. He was staying temporarily with friends throughout the state of Missouri. As I said, his brother Samuel was in Daviess County. His mother and Smith Sr. appeared to be staying with friends in far west. You'll see the Smiths only stayed temporarily in different places and rarely bought any. So this whole rewritten history that somehow the Quorum of the 12 were operating, had some kind of operating leadership role during 1835 to 1841 is completely bogus. The reason why the Quorum of the 12 took over the Utah Mormon Church was because they were in charge of the British immigrants that were arriving daily in Nauvoo. And after Smith's death, these British immigrants had nowhere to go. They were not welcomed any place, and in fact, were basically bamboozled into moving to Utah, that desolate place in the desert, and then being under the iron thumb of Brigham Young.
Time does not permit a detailed discussion of the experiences which led up to this moment in church history, but suffice it to say that problems of various kinds had been building ever since the prophet Joseph had received a revelation in July of 1831, designating Missouri as the place consecrated for the gathering of the saints and the building up of the city of Zion. By October of 1838, all-out war seemed inevitable between Mormon and non-Mormon forces confronting each other over these issues.
What issues are they talking about? Mormons believe in Jesus Christ. The Missouri settlers believed in Jesus Christ. It's not polygamy, because polygamy wasn't known until 1852, and that's been admitted by the church that nobody knew about any secret practice of polygamy, so it wasn't polygamy that was so repulsive to the Missouri settlers. Well, what could it be that would have caused all-out war between Missouri settlers and these Mormon settlers? What could it be? The fact that Mormons were an interracial, anti-slavery voting bloc? And Joseph Smith was a interracial, religious leader calling free Black and free Native Americans to join the Mormon movement at Ground Zero of Missouri, the place where the Civil War, the Western Front of the Civil War, was being waged, and clearly documented that the Mormons were kicked out of Jackson County, Missouri, because they were inviting free Blacks and free Native Americans to join them in Jackson County, Missouri. And the Missourians that kicked out the Mormons wrote up newspaper article after newspaper article declaring that the Mormons were persona non grata because they were inviting free Blacks and free Native Americans to join them in Missouri. And this would have corrupted their sensibilities of their young white daughters. At this time, it was illegal for free Black Americans to live within the territory boundaries of Missouri. And it was illegal for Native Americans to vote in any American election. Therefore, we have a double problem with Native Americans or interracial Mormons voting in the Gallatin elections. And it was very clear by the speech given by Captain Butler, an interracial Mormon that declared himself to be a free interracial Black person with the right to vote. And this is what triggered the Mormon War in Daviess County and far west Missouri. Well, the Mormon Church out of Utah has certainly spent a lot of time, 200 years, to try and conceal the fact that the Mormons were the leaders of this anti-slavery movement. And this is what made them so hated by the white pro-slavery advocates in Missouri. The place which required the Missouri Compromise, the American Civil War, saw the greatest loss of American lives in history. Certainly, this was the burning issue of the day, and certainly we see in the Mormon history that it was the slavery issue that was the cause of all the violence between the settlers in Missouri and the Mormon interracial religious movement.
After being driven from several of the counties in the western part of that state, and under the presumption they had been invited to discuss ways of defusing the volatile situation that had developed, 5 leaders of the church, including the prophet Joseph, marching under a flag of truce, approached the camp of the Missouri militia near the small settlement of Far West, located in Caldwell County. As it turned out, the flag of truce was meaningless, and the church leaders were immediately put in chains and placed under heavy guard. The morning after this arrest, 2 more Latter-day Saint leaders, including the prophet's brother Hiram, were taken prisoner, making a total of 7 in captivity. Injustice swiftly moved forward toward potential tragedy when a military court convened by officers of that militia ordered that Joseph Smith and the 6 other prisoners all be taken to the public square at Far West and summarily shot. To his eternal credit, Brigadier General Alexander Donovan, an officer in the Missouri forces, boldly and courageously refused to carry out the inhumane, unjustifiable order. In a daring stand that could have brought him his own court-martial, he cried out against the commanding officer, "It is cold-blooded murder. I will not obey your order, and if you execute these men, I will hold you responsible before an earthly tribunal, so help me God." In showing such courage and integrity, Donovan not only saved the lives of these 7 men, but endeared himself forever to Latter-day Saints in every generation.
What a remarkable performance. Does Jeffery Holland really think that we are unfamiliar with Wikipedia? Well, apparently he does. because his sprouting these big bare tears certainly has me wondering if he knows something that we don't know. But let's look up Wikipedia. Remember Jeffery Holland tearing up at the memory of General Doniphan and, of course, his law partner, General Atchison? Well, let's find out who these attorneys for the Quorum of the 12 really were. And we're going to look in Wikipedia. It's under Border Ruffian. In Kansas, Border Ruffians was the name applied to pro-slavery activists from the state of Missouri, who from 1854 to 1860 crossed the state border into Kansas territory to force the acceptance of slavery there. Armed ruffians interfered in territorial elections and attacked free state settlements. Sounds familiar. Attacked the free state settlements at Gallatin and killed Mormons. The violence was the origin of the phrase Bleeding Kansas. The ruffians contributed to the growing sectional tensions and helped bring about the American Civil War. The ruffians were driven by the rhetoric of leaders such as Senator David Rice Atchison. He was an attorney for the Mormon Quorum of the 12, who called Northerners Negro thieves and abolitionist tyrants. He encouraged Missourians to defend their institution with the bayonet and with blood, if necessary, to kill every goddamn abolitionist in the district. Notably, only a few of the Border Ruffians actually owned slaves. Most were too poor. What motivated them was the hatred of Yankees and the abolitionists and fear of free blacks living nearby.